Next team!
Marvel Rivals is a brand new 6v6 hero shooter that I've been dying to play for what feels like forever. The game has already had a few open betas, and I wasn't able to get access to those betas, unfortunately, but I've been patiently waiting my turn, staring out the window, hand pressed against it while I watched everyone else have what looked like a whole lot of fun. I was hyped for this game for two main reasons. The first reason being that I'm a big fan of hero shooters. Whenever they announce a new one, I get really excited for it. Overwatch is one of the games that I have the most amount of time spent in. I play that game pretty much religiously. It's probably my favorite first-person shooter ever. And number two, I'm a huge fan of Marvel. I'm a Marvel fanboy through and through. I'm willing to admit it. If you slap the Marvel logo on something, chances are I'm gonna open up my wallet and throw dollar bills at your face. So needless to say, a hero shooter set in the world of Marvel where you play as Marvel heroes and Marvel villains, yeah, I was really excited for it. But anyway, the full official worldwide launch of Marvel Rivals finally happened about a week ago now at this point, I believe, and I've been playing it for practically a whole entire week. Well, I've been bouncing back and forth between this game and Indiana Jones in the Great Circle. If you haven't yet, you should check out my first impressions review of this game. I've been liking this game a lot, and my next video is gonna be a longer, more in-depth review of this game. I have a lot to talk about here, so look forward to that. But yeah, Marvel Rivals, I've been playing it, I've been addicted to it, I've been dreaming about it, I've been rushing my meals, I've been speeding through traffic just to get home sooner so I can dive back into this game, which means I have a lot of thoughts that I want to share with you. So I'm gonna jump into the review. I'm gonna show you guys some raw gameplay, but before I do that, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, I talk about video games all the time. I do day one reviews, I do other video game discussions, I do other video game reviews. I just love sharing my love for video games with you guys, and I hope you join me. But enough with this introduction. Let's talk about Marvel Rivals.
Are you through?
Those guys are about to shoot at us.
You're too loud.
Double KO! You need to stop that vehicle in its tracks.
Marshals in
That's
turret
three!
mode.
Wow, way to go!
So first off, I feel like everyone at this point probably knows what Marvel Rivals is, but still, I'm gonna go over it briefly just in case you don't. Like I said, it's a 6v6 hero shooter made up of tanks, damages, and healers, and your team is trying to defeat the enemy team in a small number of game modes. And those game modes are essentially the exact same ones that are in Overwatch, or I should say two of the game modes from Overwatch. One has a team trying to escort a payload to its destination, while the other team is trying to keep the payload in its place and stop it from moving. The other game mode has both teams trying to capture the same objective, and when one team has control, it fills up a percentage meter. First team to 100% wins the round, best 2 out of 3 takes the win, that sort of thing. It's far from the most creative game modes. It's just the two standard ones that you would expect to see in a game of this genre, but honestly, that doesn't really bother me, because this game just feels so fresh and unique to play, which is something that so many Overwatch competitors fail at, but Marvel Rivals manages to stand out due to its pacing, its tone, its setting, and of course just its massive hero selection and the fact that you're playing as Marvel heroes. Again, I'm a fan of these hero shooter games. Whenever a new one gets announced, I get hyped as hell. I'm usually there day one. You can go back, you can watch my Concord review. I liked that game, for the most part. A lot more than the average person. I gave it a pretty positive review, rest its soul, but it had a lot of problems, no doubt, and one of the biggest critiques that I had with it, and I'm sure most people had with it, was that it didn't have any unique game modes. And the game modes it did have, that it borrowed from other games, again, Overwatch, didn't have enough added uniqueness to it to make it really stand out, to make you feel like you should play that game instead of Overwatch, which again was doing the exact same thing but better and for free. I had very similar criticisms with X-Defiant as well, another game that I felt lacked any originality, any soul of its own. But when it comes to Marvel Rivals, as hypocritical as it's going to sound, I don't really have those same criticisms. Marvel Rivals doesn't have its own unique game mode, but I don't really find myself missing one, if I'm being honest with you. Of course, I hope they add one eventually at some point in the future, because why wouldn't I? But it doesn't seem to really need it, because where it lacks in originality with its game modes, it makes up for in pretty much every other aspect. Like I said, pacing for one. This game has some of the most fast-paced gameplay I've experienced in a hero-based shooter. On a base level, it's far more fast-paced than Overwatch. I'm sure you can tell just by looking at the gameplay. But similar to Overwatch, there's still no sprinting. There's no kill cam skipping. There's no spawning 0.3 seconds after dying. There's still a bit of forced pacing like that, but still, it's not going to be a spam fest like Call of Duty, for example. And when matches get going, they really get going. A lot of shit happening simultaneously between heroes flying around and jumping around and people coming up behind you and voice lines being said every 5 seconds. It's chaotic, but it's fun as hell. But still, depending on the heroes on your team or the heroes on the enemy team, or the approach to combat that's being taken, the pacing can slow down. But don't get me wrong, I've never played a game that got as slow and as methodical as Overwatch. I actually think Overwatch has a greater spectrum of pacing, but on average, Marvel Rivals is a lot quicker, and again, just a lot more hectic. And I honestly thought I wouldn't like this at first. When I watched some of the gameplay from those betas, I thought it looked maybe a little too crazy. But I actually think it works well for this game, not only because the pacing makes it stand out from its competitors, but because this is a superhero slugfest, right? It makes sense that these battles should feel like they have the ability to level a metropolitan city. But luckily, it's not just chaos for the sake of it. There's definitely a method happening as well, which makes gameplay and character choices actually have meaning, and it makes strategy, both your own and your team's, matter if you want to win. It didn't seem like that at first though. On launch day, it felt like just chaos for the sake of chaos. Everyone was just throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck and what didn't. It was actually that way for the first couple days, really, but it makes sense, you know, a lot of new players learning how to play simultaneously, learning the mechanics of each hero for the first time, figuring out who worked for them and who didn't. But as each day goes on, people are learning how to play their specifically chosen heroes, learning the uses for each skill and how to work together. So now, yes, the game is still chaotic as hell, but now you can start to see the details within the chaos and see how well this game plays on a fundamental level. It's just pretty clear to me that this game had a lot of thought and effort put into it, especially when it comes to its heroes. There are, I believe, 33 at launch, which is just insane. From some of the obvious choices like Iron Man, Captain America, Spider-Man, and Wolverine, to some of the more obscure B-list characters that I love to see as part of the base roster, like Squirrel Girl, Penny Parker, Cloak and Dagger. And yeah, there are some notable people missing here and there, like there's no Deadpool, there's no Doctor Doom, there's no Cyclops, there's actually barely any X-Men in this game. And at first I was a little disappointed to see that, but then I shook the cobwebs from my brain and I realized that's actually a good thing, because this game already has a stacked roster. It has so many people that you can play as, but there's so many more left to come. This game already, just because it's Marvel and you play as Marvel characters, has a built-in years-long lifespan already. And for someone like me who is already a fan of the live service model in some instances, that's really exciting for me, because again, I can spend the next year playing as Iron Man, playing as Doctor Strange, playing as Spider-Man, playing as Wolverine, and mastering them and having a lot of fun doing that. And then just when I might be feeling a little burnt out and feeling like it's time to move on, they'll probably add Deadpool and I'll be right back in it. And that's just really exciting for me to think about. But I don't know, maybe that's just signs of an addictive personality. But anyway, let's talk about the characters in more detail.
The moon haunts you.
Like to destroy it all. KO. That's 3.
One thing about me in hero shooters is that I don't find that many characters that I vibe with where the gameplay suits me and my playstyle. I usually find one or 2 if I'm lucky, and stick with them for hundreds of hours of gameplay. And all the hours I have spent in Overwatch, not even exaggerating, probably 90% of it is spent on Mercy. I always joke that I am in no way, shape, or form a good or well-rounded Overwatch player. I'm just a good Mercy player. If I'm on your team, you're gonna get pocketed, and if you die, you're gonna get revived. Even way back when Black Ops 4 came out, remember when Black Ops 4 took a lot of inspiration from Overwatch, and they had their operators work like heroes did in Overwatch with their own ultimate abilities and everything like that? Even back then, I only played as one dude over and over and over. And one of the main reasons I liked Concord was because there were 2 characters I bounced between. But that is absolutely not the case here with Marvel Rivals. I love playing as so many different characters. At first, I thought Loki was going to be my main, because he was similar to Mercy in a way. I thought, okay, this is my dude. This is who I'm going to pump a lot of hours into. Then I tried out Hawkeye. I just cleaned house with his arrows, and I loved it. I love playing as Hawkeye. Then I tried Wanda, and I loved her even more, even if she is a little OP, if I'm being honest. And just last night, I tried Iron Man for the first time, and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, he's probably going to end up being my main, at least until I try another person tomorrow. And this is the first time in any hero shooter that I like playing as more people than I dislike playing, and even characters I suck as, like Wolverine and Spider-Man, I suck as them, but it just encourages me to get better instead of writing them off completely. And it's worth noting that so far I've only tried a small fraction of the characters. There's so many more that I have yet to try out.
Hurry up!
It's now or never. Stop them.
Maximum pulse!
That's 3. Wow, 4.
But anyway, each hero fills a different role, either tank or damage or healer, and this game does a really good job and makes all 3 feel fun to play as for the most part and feel pretty well balanced against each other. Each hero obviously has their own unique attack and special skills and abilities. Punisher, Winter Soldier, Black Widow are some that are going to use firearms. Hulk, Captain America, Wolverine, etc. are going to be more of your brawlers, your melee-based heroes. Some heroes use magic or whatever. There's just a lot of variety, which I really appreciate. And again, everyone has their own unique skills and ultimate abilities as well. And it's clear some characters are more or less based off of Overwatch characters. Like they took that gameplay design, those gameplay mechanics, and just implemented them here. They play very similar. Star-Lord reminds me of a mix between Tracer and Reaper. Hulk plays a lot like Diva. Hawkeye like Hanzo, obviously. But a good amount of heroes, or at least some of their abilities, seem to be completely unique, unlike anything that I've personally experienced or seen in a hero shooter. Like Hawkeye's ult leaves behind these like images, these reflections of enemies that were in your sight, and you can damage them. They just stand there and you can damage them, and that damage will then transfer to the player. But probably the most unique thing Marvel Rivals has going for it in terms of its gameplay is the team up abilities. Essentially, depending on who you have on your team, you unlock certain buffs or unique abilities you wouldn't otherwise have. Like Rocket can climb on top of Groot, and you two can just go around tag teaming enemies together. Or Venom can share his symbiote with Peter Parker, and that gives him a damage buff and I believe a unique ability that he wouldn't otherwise have. Or Thor can essentially electrify Captain America. It's pretty cool, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I've barely used any of these or seen any of them be used on the battlefield by anyone else, and that might just be anecdotal. Maybe that's just a me thing. Maybe I'm too distracted by everything else that I never think to use them, and maybe my team is using them all the time just behind my back and when I'm not looking and I just never notice. That's possible, but still, they don't seem to have as much of an impact on the gameplay than what I assume was intended. But again, might just be a me thing, and I'm sure those team up abilities will be used even more so in the next week and the week after that, when players become even more familiar with the characters and its mechanics.
That's the boost I need.
Control seized.
Take
Another thing Marvel Rivals really has going for it is that the developers seem to really want this game to succeed, which is really cool to see, and they want players to feel like the game is really worth their investment, even though it's free to play. The Battle Pass right now is only $5. Granted, it's a pretty small Battle Pass. I think only 4 skins are in it, but still, $5 is pretty cheap, in my opinion, for a battle pass in today's market, and they have also gone on record to say that there's no time limit to complete the battle passes. If you buy it, you can take as long as you want to level it up, which is really cool for people that, don't have that many hours in a given season to play the game. And also, all future heroes will be free. There will be no pay-to-win features, as of now at least, cosmetic only, and I really hope they stick to that. It seems like a win-win scenario if you ask me. The game is free, and we as players will feel like we're not being squeezed for every dime we own. But meanwhile, Marvel characters have an endless amount of different outfits and costumes. Costumes fans love and will definitely want to buy here and there. Like, for me, there's so many outfits that I'm waiting for them to add in this game, and when they do add them, I'm probably going to want to buy them, and that can, help the game survive, obviously. However, I do think the costumes in the shop are a little overpriced. Skins seem to be, on average, about 16 real-life dollars, and I think that's too steep. I don't know if I can justify spending $16 on a skin, and I'm a dude that buys a lot more digital skins in video games than I care to admit. I'd happily pay $10 for a skin here and there every couple months or whatever, or at least they should add some currency to the battle pass, similar to what Fortnite does, so that can sort of lessen the financial load. But with all that being said, Marvel Rivals isn't off to an absolutely perfect start. I do have some criticisms with the game, but luckily nothing too major. First off, I think each individual match can end a bit too abruptly at times. One thing I really love about Overwatch is how close and how tense games can be. Like, you go into overtime and you're about to lose, and then a teammate can pop in the objective and it restarts OT, and your team can manage to come back from almost unbeatable odds. It gets my blood pumping every single time, and it's probably the aspect of Overwatch that I love the most. It's so fun and so addictive, and Marvel Rivals has that a little bit, but not nearly as much, mainly because overtime never restarts. So if a match is really, really close, and if you leave the objective for even half of a second, you'll be hit with a loss and the game will just be over. It just takes away a lot of the tension and the nail-biting endings that I love so much about Overwatch. But my other main criticism with the game so far is that not all, but most ultimate abilities feel weirdly underpowered, which is strange. There have been so many times I've used an ult directly on top of an already damaged enemy and it didn't kill them, and that does kind of take the wind out of the sails of some of the more intense combat scenarios, at least in my opinion. Like, what's the point of saving an ult and using an ult if it can't really change the game? Another thing, I think this game needs to implement a bit more game chat options amongst teams, like the ability to say hello and thanks and let's team up and thanks for the healing. I know there are some options, don't get me wrong, I've seen them in the corner, but no one ever really uses them, and it doesn't seem like there's that wide of a variety of them. It's just missing some of the core communication options that a lot of games like this have, that make the community feel better, that make teamwork feel more real and useful, and I hope they add that in the future. But I think one of the biggest things that this game needs to add is a game mode where you're forced to have a certain amount of each class in each match. Like in Overwatch, there needs to be a tank, there needs to be 2 damage, and there needs to be 2 healer. But that's not the case here in Marvel Rivals. You can have 6 healers, or 6 tanks, or 6 damage, and granted, for the most part, teams do seem to balance themselves out pretty often and pretty frequently, which is really cool to see. Like most games that I play, there is at least 1 healer, and there is at least 1 tank, so teams seem to know what you need to be in order to win. But there are also a good handful of games where just no one wants to heal, or no one wants to be a tank, and the games just aren't fun, and you won't have a chance of winning pretty much at all. So I hope they add a game mode very similar to Overwatch, where there needs to be a tank, and there needs to be a certain amount of damage, and there needs to be a certain amount of healers, but then you can also do open queue where you can be whatever you want to, again, just like Overwatch does. But yeah, anyway, I'm having a hell of a time with Marvel Rivals so far. It's probably going to be the game of the year that I put the most amount of hours into, and that's saying a lot given that it just came out in the last month of the year. Ask me again in 1 year, and it might be one of my most played games of all time. And this has been a very multiplayer-centric year for gaming, but for me, I think Marvel Rivals swings away with the lead as my personal favorite multiplayer-centric game of the year. I'd expect this game to be very, very high on my game of the year list, and the small number of real criticisms I have aren't enough to really weigh it down in any significant way. It actually makes me even more excited for this game's future. I'm hyped as hell to see how they hopefully improve this game with every single season. I'm gonna be there day one for every new character drop. This is probably the first true genuine Overwatch competitor that I've played, a game that's gonna actually contend for my time when I'm in the mood for a hero shooter. Do I like it more than Overwatch right now? No, I think Overwatch is still probably the undeniable king of this genre, and it probably will be for a long time, again, in my opinion. But I think Marvel Rivals is the first true competitor as opposed to just a poor imitation like so many other games. And who knows, maybe in a year or two, this will be the game that's wearing the hero shooter crown. I don't know. But keep in mind, like I said in my intro, I am a Marvel fanboy. I'm 100% aware that my enjoyment of this game is being elevated by my love of these characters. If you don't like Marvel as much as I do, your enjoyment will vary. But anyway, I'm curious, what are you thinking about Marvel Rivals? Have you played it yet? If you have, let me know what you're thinking about it in the comments down below. And if you haven't, let me know. Do you plan to? Are you going to play this game eventually, or are you going to skip it completely? Either way, I want to know your thoughts in the comments. Once again, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and yeah, just thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.
Friends have saved my life far more times than weapons.
Help get that vehicle to its destination.
Don't mind me. I'm just dying.
Crush the spiders from afar!
I think